Alright, and welcome to your annual Lockout Tagout training. Lockout Tagout, or otherwise known as energy control, energy isolation. This is brought to you by the MECO Safety Department, and it's for our authorized employees, which is going to be you, who will be working around, on, near, or in energized equipment. The purpose of this training, like I said, is your refresher training. Refresher training is Lockout Tagout is required annually. And as it's required annually, it doesn't always mean it has to be a PowerPoint presentation. The way it's supposed to work is as we progress through the year, I'm supposed to do audits on you guys taking this training to make sure this training is doing what it's supposed to, and that you guys know what you're doing when you're performing these tasks. The issue is we just don't do it enough to warrant not having this training, and I really appreciate you guys sending me pictures, letting me know when you're doing lockout tagout. So keep doing that. That's great, but it's we don't do it enough to where if something happened, we need to have this training. And this is your initial training. Welcome to Lockout Tagout. We're going to learn quite a bit here today. As always, it's employer provided, and as an employer, we need to make sure we're giving you the right training that's effective, and training that's easy for you to understand and that serves a purpose. It makes sure that the function of our energy control program, or our Lockout Tagout program, is understood, and then it portrays the knowledge and skills necessary for the safe application and sends you guys home at the end of the day. The Lockout Tagout program is found in the General Industry Standards of the 29 CFR 1910 Section 147. The Construction Standards of the 1926 will refer you to this standard. It's what's called the horizontal standard. So the golden rule here is in the general industry. All can be found in the 147, and that dictates what I train you on. What we're going to talk about today is our hazard recognition. Why we want to lockout tagout, when we want to lockout tagout. We're going to talk about why we have the program, and then how to lockout tagout. I know that's all what we want to learn here today is the procedures, the step-by-steps. And we're going to talk about the procedures, how to lock out, and then how to remove your devices, because they're not the reverse process. They are different and both very important. We're going to talk about the limitations of tags and how those tags need to be set up and what kind of tags you need to use. We're going to talk about employee retraining. Again, this is annual, so you'll be watching this video every year about this time. And we'll do real quick about outside personnel or other contractors. That'll be real quick. So let's get started. What is lockout tagout? Lockout tagout is a system. And if you remember correctly, for a system to work, all the components of that system have to work together. And it's a two-part system. You have the lockout system and the tagout component. You can't have one without the other. That just doesn't work. So what is the lockout? Lockout is the actual physical placing of a lock and an energy isolation device to prevent that machine from cycling, to prevent someone from touching it or accidentally cycling that machine or energizing it. And then you have the tagout portion, which is the placing of that tag in plain view so that everyone can see, hey, this machine's being worked on, don't touch it. You can't have one without the other. You can't lock something out, hope no one touches it, and in the same sense, you can't just put a tag on it and not lock it out, and again, hope no one energizes that equipment. So you have to have both of these for it to be lockout tagout. Anything less than that is non-compliance. So some hazard recognition. When are you going to want to lockout tagout? Whenever you have to remove or bypass a guard or a safety device, when you're placing your body inside that machine, that's a real good time to lock and tag that out. If it cycles, which it shouldn't, but if we're doing it incorrectly, that's where we see injuries, that's where we see death. if a mechanism is jammed, if something's in there that could hurt you, whether that be rotating gears or blades or electricity. We want to make sure we lock that out and isolate that energy. When we remove panels, when we are working under something, if something's energized and we have to move inside of it, we want to lock and tag that out. Like you can see in the cartoon on the right, we want to make sure, because you just don't know, and finding out the hard way is going to be a bad day. When we talk about locking out and tagging out, we want to talk about all energy hazards. I know when we think about it, it's just electricity, but there are many, many ways a machine can operate. It could be controlled by electricity. It can be controlled by mechanical devices, whether that's pneumatic, which is compressed air, hydraulic, or other oils, cams, engines. We have chemical energy, which could be glycol or steam or something along those lines. We have thermal energy, which is both heat and cold. And when we talk about lockout, tagout, we want to look at all of these. We want to isolate all the energy sources because they might not be dependent on each other. Just because you unplug it does not mean it can't still cycle using other energy. So that's what we're going to really focus on today, is noticing all the energy sources. First and foremost, we have electrical energy. What we think about most when it comes to lockout, tagout. The thing is, electricity, it will kill you. It doesn't take much to kill you, and it will hurt the whole time. Electricity causes organ failure, especially heart. Electricity likes to take the path of least resistance. Humans are great conductors, so it's going to flow through us and causing a lot of damage along the way. It produces several burns. It could burn you from the inside. It does surface burns or skin burns, and that's at the very least. Anyone that works with electricity knows just how dangerous this stuff is. And unfortunately, most of the stuff we use today is powered by electricity. So we want to make sure we're locking that out and making sure that it cannot be cycled. Mechanical hazards, and I kind of broke this down into two forms. We have kinetic and potential. Kinetic is in motion. Something is actively moving, whether that's gears or blades or wedges or fan blades. And that's where you see, if those are in motion and we're working inside those, that's where you see the amputations, the cuts or lacerations, and unfortunately leads to death. There are fatalities that occur because improper lockout and tagout are not doing it at all. Potential or stored energy. I like to use gravitational potential energy, and when I think of that, I think of a metal shear, where that blade is being held up by a hydraulic ram or a camshaft or some other device that, when released, will cycle that blade down and shear that metal. We want to make sure we're isolating that as well. What's stopping that blade from coming down on you if you release that energy, if you unplug that machine? I've seen weights and springs give, or pistons under pressure release their pressure once to become unplugged or the energy is no longer applied. And we don't want to find out the hard way. We want to stop that blade from coming down on us when we release that energy, and that could be placing a 6x6 piece of lumber between the blade and the cutting surface. And that's a viable way to block that energy from happening. Chemical hazards. As with any chemical, and again, that could be glycol or steam or anything else that powers equipment or is a byproduct of that equipment, can have, as always, check the safety data sheets. Those safety data sheets will tell you the chemical makeup, the behavior of that chemical, the spill procedures, the first aid procedures and disposal, and all sorts of things. Before you work with any chemicals, you should always consult the safety data sheets. Chemicals can react with oxygen. If released, they can react with other chemicals, heat, cold. They could start fires or combust. If not contained, they could generate harmful gases or fumes. So when you're working on chemically powered or chemical byproducts of machines, release, drain, or vent those chemicals safely before working on it. And if that machine is powered by a chemical, make sure you isolate that chemical. Make sure that none of that chemical or liquid is getting to that machine to cycle it. Thermal hazards, and that's, again, both hot and cold. Some machines can use temperature to cycle. Once it gets a certain degree, it could set off a check valve, or it could set off something to cycle that machinery or energize itself or turn on and off. Not only that, hot equipment and fluids will burn you. If released, if spilled, the machines themselves will be hot or cold depending on how they operate. So that's part of the lockout tagout procedures, letting that machine come to a safe working temperature before working on it. That way you're not burning yourself or freezing your skin. One of the examples I use is propane. Propane comes out very cold, and it freezes your skin. So lockout tagout procedures. One thing I want to focus on when it comes to procedures is knowing the general procedures is the most important thing. Knowing the procedure will help you with the details. The details people tend to get caught up in. How do I work on this Daikin rooftop unit? Well, same way you would lock and tag on anything else. And here's how you do that. First and foremost, know the equipment and know the systems. Take some time and familiarize yourself with how that equipment works before working on it. Know the isolation hazards. Know the energy sources. And ask yourself, what are the energy sources? What are the hazards? Is it just electrical? Is it electrical and pneumatic? Does it use gravitational potential energy? Ask yourselves, how is this machine powered? And then find the isolation points. It could be a plug. It could be a circuit breaker. It could be a hydraulic ram. Find those and determine what equipment you need. Do you need the hasps? Do you need blocks? Do you need... And as you find what you need, you should have this in your kit. And we'll go over the kit in the next few slides. And then what is the procedure? And we'll go over the procedure here soon as well. And then all the details should fall into place. You shouldn't have to worry about the details when you know the right procedure. And again, working on unfamiliar machinery is a hazard in itself, so take the time and do your homework. Here's a standard kit. A lockout tagout would, of course, have locks and tags. It wouldn't be a lockout tagout kit without those. Those locks, as you can see, are special locks. They're not your standard master locks. They're red, just like everything else, and they have that red and black danger symbol to kind of draw the attention and say, hey, look at me, don't touch it. They have hasps. Down at the bottom, you'll see they have those metal jaws and those holes, and what those are designed to do is those are designed to hold multiple locks. You might have multiple people working on that equipment, and each person has to have their own lock and tag, and we'll go over that here soon as well. They have flanges and pancakes and valve covers and breaker clips, and basically they have isolation devices for any energy source you can come across. And it's up to you to determine when and where to use them. So who can lock out? And again, as I started this training, I mentioned authorized personnel, and that's you guys. You guys are the one who are working on that energized equipment. You're the one who's told to go out by the employer to go and work on these things. That's who can lock out. And each person who is an authorized personnel has to go through the training, has to be given the kit, has to have the knowledge and skills. And the other kind of person is a affected employee. And that may be someone who is not necessarily familiar with lockout tagout, but know that it exists and knows why it exists. So it could be their equipment you're working on. And they have to know that you will be locking out and what you're doing, but they're not going to be the one performing the actual work. According to the standard, the 1910-147, it says that the authorized employee and the supervisor has the authority to remove the lock and tag, and I don't advertise that. My rule is that only that person, only the authorized employee, has the authority to remove their lock and tag. And the reason being, it's way too easy for miscommunication to happen, for the supervisor to think that employee's done, remove their lock and tag. All of a sudden, that employee's back at work, and there's no lock and tag, and someone can energize that equipment. Remember, OSHA is the absolute bare minimum. Anyone is allowed to go above and beyond OSHA compliance, which is what gives me the liberty to say, hey, supervisor, sorry, you're not authorized to remove locks and tags. So how do I lock out? First and foremost, notify the affected personnel. Tell them, hey, I'm going to be working on your equipment. I'm going to lock and tag it out. Don't touch it. Don't cycle it. Do you have any questions? Prepare for shutdown. This includes doing your homework, understanding that machine, understanding how that works, and asking yourself those questions. Again, what are the energy sources, and how do I isolate them? Shut down the machine properly. The reason you want to do a proper shutdown is because if you don't do it the correct way, you could have stored energy. Some machines have capacitors that have stored electrical energy, and that could be just enough to cycle that machine. Even if it's only once. If it goes once and you're in there, it could kill you. Isolate all energy sources. Again, we're not sure if those energy sources are dependent on each other, if it could cycle even if it's unplugged. So isolate all energy sources using your Lockout Tagout kit. Apply your locks and tags to all energy sources. So where there's an isolation device or a lockout, all of those have to have a lock and a tag. Release or block residual energy and verify energy isolation. This is making sure that you actually locked and tagged out properly, or there's not other lingering issues. So if you want to put your locks and tags, go ahead, try to cycle that machine. And if it cycles, we have bigger issues. So that's how you lock and tag something out. Here is how you remove that lock and tag. And remember, it's not the opposite procedure. First and foremost, inspect the area and equipment and make sure you clean up after yourselves. I have a lot of flight time in Blackhawks, and our mechanics were fantastic. They took their jobs very seriously, because if even a 3/8 wrench found its way into the engine compartment and we took off and flew, that could cause a crash and kill the crew. They grounded many birds if they were missing a tool, just to make sure that it wasn't in the helicopter. And there were times where they did find it, and we were thankful they did. Ensure all machine guards are in place. When we're restoring an equipment to operating condition, make sure those safety guards and those machine accessories are put back how they're supposed to. We don't want to give the affected personnel a false sense of security, thinking their machine is good to go when we didn't put a guard back. Move your tools and equipment away from the machine. Again, we don't want our tools finding themselves inside a rotating part. And if, just like a helicopter, if our tools are left inside equipment that rotates, cuts, shears, it could cause a catastrophic failure, and worse, it could cause injury to someone or even death. Inform others of startup. And so that would be the affected personnel. Let them know you're turning their machine back on. Let them know that it will be safe to use again here soon. But again, if you're not the only person working on that equipment, there are going to be other locks and tags. And if you finish your work and there's other people working, don't try to start it up. For one, it shouldn't do anything, but there are others working in that equipment. Restore system connections, and again, start the machine properly. Remove your locks and tags. When you conduct a normal startup, you are ensuring that all the energy sources are unblocked, everything's working properly, and that you finish your job, task complete, and everything's done and safe. Like I said in the previous slide, if there are other locks and tags, don't try to cycle the machine. There are people in there working, and they trust you. They are trusting the lock and tag out system to work. And again, never remove anyone else's lock and tags. Only you have the authority to remove your lock and tag. Let's talk about tags for a little bit. The tags in your kit look very similar to this. They are red and white striped. They have the black and red danger. They might not have your picture, but it does say somewhere along the lines of this equipment is locked out, please do not touch. Like I said, it is a component in the system, and you don't want to lock something out without a tag because it doesn't tell that person not to touch the equipment. And then you don't want to just put a tag and not a lock because the system's going to fail. Make sure tags are legible and visible. Put them in where everyone can see them. Put them in a language that the affected personnel are going to understand. And secure them in a manner they're going to be secure. So Scotch tape's probably not going to do the trick. Use the provided zip ties. They have to look something like that. You can't just put a 8.5 by 11 computer paper with Sharpie on it that says locked out, don't touch. The equipment tag should be laminated or at least weatherproof because we do work outside from time to time. So employee retraining. Like anything else, sometimes changes occur. That could be a change to the standard. It could be a change to your assignment. Maybe you are an affected personnel, and now you're going to be an authorized personnel. If there's changes in machines, changes in processes, or maybe a new hazard introduced, there's going to be some retraining involved. And it doesn't mean there's going to be a PowerPoint, but we're going to sit down and talk about it and maybe have some informal discussion. Again, Lockout Tagout is an annual training. I do periodic audits when we do Lockout Tagout. Unfortunately, we just don't do it enough. And those Lockout Tagout audits are to make sure that this training is effective, that we're retaining this training when we have the skills necessary. But the audits could also prove that maybe we're not doing it exactly right, and that could require some additional training. Outside personnel or other contractors, what this is saying is that if I had someone to come work on my equipment, I'm going to make sure those contractors are trained in Lockout Tagout, have their program that's equal or greater than ours, and if not, we're going to either not use them or we're going to give them training or not use them until they get their own training. So thank you. That does conclude your Lockout Tagout refresher online training. For my records, please email me with the time and date of completion, and your 2018 Lockout Tagout training code word is Anaconda. Send the email to the appropriate address depending on who you work for and who I'm contracted by. As always, if you have any questions, concerns, ideas for more training, put that in the email. Again, thank you for your time today, and enjoy.